fading skies. Tattered flags waving dreams in our eyes. The crowds roar like a storm on the wind. We're the underdogs fighting again.
Hey, what's going on, guys, and good evening, and welcome to another edition of Stateside Footy. Before we get into it, make sure you hit the like and subscribe buttons and also the notification bell so you don't miss out on any content from Stateside Footy, including tonight's World Cup roster prediction show. And of course, we do this after every window. After every international window, we do this as we update depth charts, and I predict what the 2026 World Cup roster might look like for Mauricio Pochettino. So definitely hit that like and subscribe buttons. All right, so excellent window. As you know, a very good performance against Ecuador that saw the rise of Tanner Tessman, potentially pushing his way into the starting 11, which was absolutely brilliant. And then, of course, I guess you can say the steady play of Miles Robinson at right back, on the right side of the back three. Potentially even a little Weston McKennie a little bit. But that being said, then they followed it up with a 2-goal performance of Haji Wright against Australia. And so from that standpoint, this has to be easily the most successful international window under Mauricio Pochettino. I think the team looked great. That being said, let's go ahead and get into it because this version is going to be a little bit of a tiered system. And how I've tiered this out, obviously, is World Cup roster locks, followed by tier 2, which is on the bubble, followed by outside looking in, and then, of course, in Poch's doghouse. So we're going to begin with World Cup roster locks, and I'm going to begin with the strikers. And, of course, as of right now, the 3 strikers that I have in are Flo Balogun, obviously, and, of course, Flo gives this U.S. team such dynamism. He's so dynamic up top, right? And it's actually kind of incredible when you think about it, because I don't think we've really had this type of striker that's playing on such a high level in quite a long time. I literally harken back to the days of maybe Josie Altidore, maybe Clint, but also you kind of have to go all the way back to maybe the 90s with an Eric Winalda, maybe a Brian McBride. Those type of strikers that kind of tilt the field a little bit. And Flo Balogun is certainly one of those type of guys. And of course, the reemergence of Flo in the September window, as he was an injury replacement for Brian White. It's kind of ridiculous to think about it right now. But when he stepped on the pitch against Japan and just reminded everyone, including Mauricio Pochettino, of the talent that he actually possesses, it almost seems like it's going to be a no-brainer. And I think he was steadfast in that in the October window. And from that standpoint, as of right now, obviously, Flo Balogun is one of my World Cup roster locks. The other one is Ricardo Pepi. And I think Ricardo Pepi kind of goes without saying. I mean, when you really look at the depth of the striker pool, Ricardo Pepi is going to be one of those guys, brings a little bit of a change of pace from a guy like Flo Balogun. But that being said, Ricardo Pepi can score goals, man. The only thing that Ricardo Pepi is dealing with right now is injuries, and it sucks a little bit. But that being said, he will be back prior to the November window, and at that point, the question is going to be, yeah, Ace Lionel. It's I hate to see that Joe isn't considered in the bubble, but we all know why. But that being said, once Ricardo Pepi gets back to a full 90, and he starts putting in those type of performances, no doubt, not only will he get called in, but I would probably assume that he is going to be one of three strikers on the World Cup roster. The last guy is Haji Wright, and it was excellent to see Haji Wright come in after a little time off from the national team and stamp his position on this team. And one of the things that Haji Wright provided that somebody like Josh Sargent couldn't do with multiple call-ins was, immediately have an impact. And I know I can already hear the argument, well, it was Australia. It's like, yeah, it doesn't necessarily matter who the opponent is. What matters is Mauricio Pochettino gives them a start and says, all right, show me something. Boom. And he has 2 goals. And it's just unbelievable considering the lack of goal scoring prowess from a guy like Josh Sargent, who plays in the same league, versus a guy like Haji Wright, who had it was automatic. There was no doubt that in his mind, he was going to take advantage of the opportunity. The next guy down the list is Christian Pulisic, obviously, without a doubt. Then, of course, we have Malik Tillman. And again, I think Malik Tillman has punched his ticket to the World Cup. And when you consider just exactly how this team is going to line up in the, I guess you could say, the new formation in which Mauricio Pochettino has, it looks like Pochettino is going to continue to play. Malik Tillman is going to be a pivotal piece, and I would probably assume right now he's one of my starters. Things could definitely change, but that being said, as of right now, if he continues to produce in the Bundesliga at a very high level, there's a very good chance that Malik Tillman is probably going to be one of the 2 starters. I guess you can call it 2 high tens or whatever the case may be. The other guy is Tyler Adams, and I think that's kind of self-explanatory. I think Mauricio Pochettino likes him. And not only does Mauricio Pochettino like him, but he trusts him, but it's also his play as well, too. And especially if there's a guy opposite him playing 2 low sixes and playing 2 high tens, the guy that's going to be playing next to Tyler Adams is going to essentially have a huge impact, because it's going to allow Tyler to do exactly what he does best, which is put out fires pretty much everywhere. And at that stage, considering he applies his trade in the Premier League against some of the best attackers in the world, Tyler Adams is easily going to punch his ticket to the World Cup. Tanner Tessman is another guy that I think has, in my mind at least, has stamped that one. And obviously the play against Ecuador was brilliant. When he came off the bench a little bit there against Australia, things just seemed to change for the good. We went a little bit shaky in that back 3, back 5, and then all of a sudden when Tanner came in, things tend to steady out a little bit right there. And Australia literally just from that point weren't allowed to necessarily wasn't necessarily that direct as they were previously. The next guy is Christian Roldan, and I know this is probably where people are going to be a little bit up in arms. But when you look at the way that Mauricio Pochettino talks about him, they continue going from the September window to the October window. It seems like the trust in a guy like Christian Roldan, not just with his play, and then of course what we saw his production against Australia, 2 assists, and of course that cheeky little through ball to set up Haji's first goal. those are the type of things that end up backing up your manager when they put that vote of confidence in you. And me personally, as of right now, I have his ticket punched. Now that doesn't necessarily mean he starts game 1 of the World Cup. I don't even think it means he starts game 2. But that being said, knowing that he's got a guy on his bench that he absolutely trusts, and make no mistake, Mauricio Pochettino trusts Christian Roldan. As far as I'm concerned, you have to kind of put him in this category. The other guy is Chris Richards, and of course he's our best center back. And I don't think that I don't think it's I don't think it is a rush to judgment to think that he's got his ticket punched to the World Cup, considering he's starting to develop, almost being one of the better center backs with the ball at his feet. I think he's calm, but what we saw against Australia in the leadership, those are the type of intangibles that Mauricio Pochettino loves to see. Guys who are going to fight for the badge, guys who are going to fight for his teammates. But that being said, it's like when you look at the individual skill level of a guy like Chris Richards, it's obvious he's going to be there. Tim Ream, yep, I got him there as well too, because Tim Ream, until somebody clearly beats Tim Ream out, he's probably going to be there in 2026. And again, he's probably the best center back with the ball at his feet. He's calm, in tense positions. And at this stage, it's depending on who is actually going to be playing as the left wing back is obvious. As far as I'm concerned, is going to determine, Tim Ream's ability. Because that being said, if his back shoulder is covered, Tim Ream's going to be actually invaluable. Anthony Robinson, again, without question, probably our best left back on the roster. And when you consider how we're playing now with wing backs, I would probably assume that if he's 100% healthy, he's probably going to get the start on the left-hand side. Serginho Dest, again, seems like a roster. I can't speak English. Roster lock to me as well too. And again, this is no knock against Timmy Weah. A part of me actually wants to believe that come game 1 of the World Cup, we want our best 11 there. And I've been trying to rack my brain to thinking it's like, well, is that going to be Timmy Weah on the right-hand side, or is that Serginho Dest? And me personally, I kind of think it's Serginho Dest, because of the multitudes of ways you can use a guy like Timmy Weah. I think Timmy Weah is going to be on the roster, no doubt about it. But from that standpoint, I think Mauricio Pochettino looks at him as the type of guy where you can plug and play in a few different positions, and especially a few different formations if they choose to do so against certain opponents. And, obviously the flexibility of a guy like Timmy Weah. Max Arfston, I think he's probably going to be there as well too. And it's actually kind of, as far as I'm concerned, I don't necessarily like this, because I actually do believe that John Tolkien is a little bit better for this team, but for whatever reason, Tolkien can't seem to get a call up. Granted, I get it. He's in the second Bundesliga, but that being said, if you paid attention to the Yanks Abroad series and you've been following along, his numbers have been absolutely brilliant for Holstein Kiel. But that being said, Max Arfston still continues to get a call up, and there's nothing in my mind that thinks that that's going to change between now and the World Cup. Same thing with Alex Freeman. And again, the question in my mind is, okay, well, what's Alex Freeman's role if Tim Weah is going to be on this team and he's going to be first off the bench to replace a guy either like Anthony Robinson or Serginho Dest, right? Because obviously if Max Arfston's on the roster, what kind of role does that carve out? Is this going to be in case of an emergency type situation? Because you wonder if he could play on the right side of the back three. Probably not. A guy like Joe Scally seems to be a little bit more inclined for that kind of role. But that being said, Scally's in Potch's doghouse right now. So these type of things have to work itself out. And of course, Matt Freese is my last World Cup roster lock. And as of right now, he's number 1. He's the clear cut. He's the clear cut one in net. And until we see movement from a guy like Matt Turner to possibly reclaim it, there's no other choice but to have Matt Freese as number one. Turning to our on the bubbles. And I understand Rich Rod's like, McKennie is on the bubble? Yeah. Where's Johnny? Yeah, well, Johnny right now is hurt. But Johnny's been absolutely, absolutely terrible. And I forgot to include his picture. That's the other reason where you're asking where Johnny is. Johnny actually is on the bubble as well, too. And we'll get to him in just a second. But the reason why I have McKennie is a few different reasons. Number one, he hasn't necessarily played with the national team in quite some time. This was the first window since March that he's been on the team. And it was in that March camp where he kind of showed up overweight, had a lack of interest. And I really believe that he turned himself off to that Mauricio Pochettino was turned off towards Weston McKennie. Then you look at the club side, and it was only until 2 weeks prior to the October window did he get 2 full 90s, and he was sparingly used, kept off the Gold Cup roster because of the Club World Cup, and even then wasn't exactly spectacular. And in this window, he had moments in this window. But that being said, I still think that Weston McKennie's best position is in more of a box-to-box role. But we don't play. As of right now, we don't necessarily play with a traditional box-to-box, which means he's going to have to play higher up the pitch. But that being said, who are you going to take in that role? Are you going to take Malik Tillman, who's probably better for this club in that role? Or are you going to take Weston McKennie higher up the pitch, knowing that his best position is a little bit more deeper? And as of right now, until I actually see Weston McKennie play at the same level as a guy like Malik Tillman, yeah, he's kind of on the bubble. Now, that doesn't mean that he's not going to make the roster. I would probably assume that he's going to be a lock before we actually hit the final, before we actually find out who actually makes the roster for good going into the 2026 World Cup. But as of right now, I actually have him on the bubble. Same thing with Brendan Aronson, because Brendan Aronson, even though he played well late against Australia, he's just like Weston McKennie, he's got to come back in, and he actually has to replicate that performance that we saw against Australia. That nice little cheeky little pass where he found a cutting in Diego Luna. That was absolutely brilliant. And it just goes to show you the type of caliber that he has. But again, if we're going to use the same excuses for Christian Roldan, then we're going to have to use the same excuses for Brendan Aronson. It was Australia. Okay, fair enough. If we're going to do that, we're going to be fair. But that being said, these two guys are probably going to be on the World Cup roster. But as of right now, I have them on the bubble because I want to see it. If both of those guys come into the Paraguay-Uruguay window and put up good, better performances than we saw this window, these guys are going to move into World Cup roster locks. As of right now, they're on the bubble. The third one is Diego Luna. And again, I probably think Diego probably makes it because, again, he's Pacha's guy, man. And he's been that guy since he broke his nose in the January window, and he stayed on the pitch, and those type of things kind of endeared himself to it. But as the year has progressed, he has shown two things. Number one, he's very good against CONCACAF minnows. Like when it comes to the Trinidad and Tobagos, and when it comes to the Guatemalas and the Costa Ricas of the world, he's a very good player. But when we saw him against Turkey, and we saw him against Switzerland, and we saw him against Mexico, and we saw him against South Korea, and we saw him, it just seems that maybe this might be a level too high for him. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that he's not going to have a future with the national team, especially if he gets a move over to Europe and he starts challenging himself a little bit better against better talent. Maybe, I would probably assume he's probably going to be a part of that 2030 cycle. 2026, I probably assume that it's going to be a coach's choice whether to include him and whether or not he believes that he's going to be able to produce against the upper echelon talent at the World Cup. At that stage, you kind of have to put him in this category, and it's no disrespect. Alex Zendejas is another guy who I have on the bubble as well too, and it's because we just haven't seen a lot of Zendejas. It's like, that's cool. He scored the goal against Japan. And all of a sudden there was some buzz. But again, with all of these guys, I want to see it against better talent. I actually want to see it with my eyes to make sure that it wasn't a fugazi, because with all the excuses that some of these fans make, well, it was a rotated Japanese squad. Okay, fair enough. If that's what you want to go, I want to see it against a team like Paraguay, a team like Uruguay, and if he can replicate it. And by the way, for his club right now, this dude is absolutely on fire with his club. And that does have some parallel transit. That translates a little bit to the national team. But again, I would have loved to see him in this window against Ecuador. Unfortunately, he was dealing with a little bit of an injury, so we didn't get to see him. It was actually kind of a letdown. So hopefully by November, he's ready to go. The guy that should have been there, and for whatever reason I skipped over him, Johnny Cardoso, to me, is also on the bubble. And again, it's kind of ridiculous to think that he's on the bubble considering he plays for Atletico Madrid. But that being said, he's hurt right now. And so we have no idea what the time frame is going to be for Johnny. And then, of course, if he comes back, then obviously he's got to be built back up to a full 90. But let's call it what it is, man. Johnny Cardoso has been absolute dog shit for the national team in the limited time that we have seen him. We had him for the Gold Cup, and like against Turkey and Switzerland, he was not good. And for whatever reason, there's something about that transition from club to national team that just has yet to click. But that being said, man, what I will say is that just like Zendejas and just like McKennie, the talent is there to the point where if he has one good camp, all of a sudden, he's starting to look a lot better as far as I'm concerned. Johnny's got the talent, man. No doubt Johnny's got the talent. And Ace Lionel says Alejandro Zendejas looks good against a low block. Yeah, 100%. And of course, when you see how Mexican teams are playing against Club America, that's all he faces is a low block. So I would hope that he's good against a low block. But that being said, I really wanted to see Zendejas in this window, and we didn't get to, and it seems like it's a little bit of a letdown. The other guy that I have on the bubble is Mark McKenzie. And again, just because of the rotation of the center backs and because we just don't really have a deep center back pool, chances are that he's going to make the World Cup roster. But this is specifically for me. I want to see more of him starting with the national team. The thing that, he looked rocky a little bit in that match, early in that match against Australia. It seemed like the chemistry between him and Timmy Weah, it didn't look good for like the first 30 minutes before things kind of calmed down a little bit. But then again, he was kind of rocky when he came on against Ecuador as well too. But luckily, it held out and we were able to get a result. But that being said, I would probably assume he's probably going to be on the World Cup roster. But for me, at least, he's on the bubble because I actually want to see him start more. But again, the reason why we haven't is because I would probably assume that Pochettino still looks at him a little raw, a little green. But that being said, with this club, his position in this club is firm, and he's actually playing. The Toulouse isn't exactly the greatest club in the world, but he's actually one of the the bright spots of that team. Cameron Carter-Vickers is also on the bubble as well too. And I would probably assume it for the exact same reasons as Mark McKenzie. It's because we just don't have a deep center back pool. And I would probably assume he probably gets on the roster just considering you're going to need depth. But we just haven't seen Pochettino actually put a lot of trust in Cameron Carter-Vickers. I think we've seen sporadic starts throughout 2025. Maybe a start, I think the last start he got potentially might have been in the March window. I can't necessarily remember, which lets you know exactly how far back it's been since we've seen Cameron Carter-Vickers. He still gets called in for obvious reasons, but when it comes to first choice starting center backs, he's rarely on the field. Yeah, I would agree. I would agree with that, Ace. The other guy is Miles Robinson, and he was actually one of the bright spots of this camp. getting 2 consecutive starts on the right side of the back three, and I thought he held up pretty well. I actually thought that Ecuador would probably test that side a little bit, and he held up good against Ecuador. Now, granted, that goal that was given up against Australia was absolutely just unbelievably ghastly. But that being said, it is what it is, man. Bad goals are bad goals, but for the most part, I thought he held up pretty well in this last window, to the point where I actually have him on the bubble now. Because again, right, when your coach is giving you that type of leeway and showing you that much trust, you have no choice but to put up. And I thought Miles Robinson did a very good job in that window. Now, I don't necessarily know if he makes the World Cup, because you typically want your best starters. And if it were me, I would actually have Mark McKenzie on the left, considering he plays there for his club. I would have Richards on the right and potentially have Ream central, because I think that's probably the best. That's like pound for pound, that's the best three, but you're going to need rotation potentially, or backups. And I would probably assume that's where CCV and Miles Robinson come in, or whatever the combination that Mauricio Pochettino is going to use in that back three. But that being said, I got him on the bubble because, again, just like everyone here, I want to see it again. And I want to see it against better opponents before I actually make him a World Cup lock. Matt Turner is my last player on the bubble. And again, I probably assume he's going to be there. But that being said, it's like we haven't seen Turner play in a long time. And here's the interesting thing, right? When it comes to metrics, shot stopping metrics, Matt Turner has better metrics in Major League Soccer than Matt Freese. Yet Matt Freese still gets picked over him, right? So I would probably assume that because of the experience of Matt Turner, that puts him on the roster. But with all of these guys, man, I just want to see him play. I really do. Let's see. Do you think No Kai Banks will get a call up before the World Cup? I hope. And I hope it's this upcoming November, because, again, I would love to see No Kai Banks be a part of this roster. I actually have him in the outside looking in category because I think that's kind of where he should be. Hasn't necessarily really gotten an opportunity, a really fair opportunity. They called him into September and then didn't play him, which to me was a bummer. Speaking of outside looking in, Patrick Agyemang. I do. I don't think Patrick Agyemang makes the World Cup, and I think it's for a multitude of reasons. Number one, this is his first journey outside of Major League Soccer. That's number one, and I would probably assume that it's going to be an up and down season for him as far as form goes. But I just don't think he's strong enough to play at the highest levels of international football yet, plain and simple. Again, just like Diego Luna, there's certain opponents where he actually plays incredibly well against, and he has nice looking goals. But when the rubber meets the road and you're playing against a Mexico, or you're playing against Ecuador, Argentina, Colombia, there's no way he holds up. Yeah, and that's the issue. He falls. He finds him, like in the hold up play. He finds his ass on the ground, and that's exactly right, Ace. 100%. And I just don't think that he's ready for the highest levels of international football. Now, again, this might be something where it's like the 2030 cycle, where he actually can come into his own, and he's had a few seasons in Europe. That to me seems a little bit more realistic than 2026, and it has nothing to do with like his talent. I think he's fine. It's just I don't think he's ready, personally. The other guy is Josh Sargent, and Josh, and it sucks because I'm one of Josh's biggest fans. I think Josh is the hell of a striker. It sucks this season that Norwich is absolute dog shit this year. It kind of bums me out because they lost a lot of key pieces that actually played well with Josh. And of course, Josh has had so many fucking bites of the apple with the national team. He's been routinely called in, and yet he literally cannot find the back of the net. And I think that Mauricio Pochettino saw enough in September where he was willing to give Haji Wright an opportunity. And because Haji took it, I think there's a clear separation between 3 and 4 on the striker pool. And I would probably assume that Josh is probably sitting at number 4. Do I think Josh gets called in before the World Cup? I do, because there's a good chance that one of those guys are gonna be dealing with a knock at the time that the window comes around, right? So I think it's November and March. So there's like 2 more windows for European players, and I think that Josh probably gets called in one more time due to an injury or due to a lack of form, and that's going to be the last opportunity prior to selection for Josh to remind people of his talent. But as of right now, I have him on the outside looking in. Same thing with Damian Downs, and this one kind of broke my heart a little bit, because I thought Damian would go to Southampton and literally take advantage of everything the championship has to afford, but he's been given so many goddamn opportunities at Southampton, and I think he's still goalless, and that right there is going to be that. Unfortunately, you're not gonna get called into the national team if you're a striker and you're not scoring. It sucks. It just is what it is. Yeah, I do too. If Pepe is healthy and playing, he's gonna get called in without a doubt. That's kind of Pochettino's ace in the hole right there, because with a healthy Pepe and a healthy Balogun, there's a good chance that Haji doesn't even see the field. But that being said, it would be something nice to have 3 informed strikers ready for the World Cup. 100%. Paxton Aronson gets this one right here as well too, on the outside looking in. Paxton has had multiple call-ups this year, hasn't seen the field, sporadically used in the Gold Cup, wasn't involved in the September camp, wasn't involved in the October camp. It is what it is, man. He made the move to Major League Soccer for an obvious reason. But for whatever reason, he's just not on Pochettino's radar, or if he feels that Paxton isn't going to be a 2026 guy, more of a 2030 guy. So naturally, he's on the outside looking in. Same with Aiden Morris. Aiden Morris did get brought into this camp, and unfortunately had some nice moments, but overall it was a consistency issue for me. And I think when you look at the type of camp a guy like Tanner Tessman and Christian Roldan had versus his camp, you're kind of left looking at it thinking like, yeah, he's kind of on the outside looking in. But again, I would probably assume he gets called in again in November, and we'll see exactly how Pochettino uses him. But that being said, for me personally, I have him on the outside looking in. I did see that. I have to look at it again too, because I just briefly saw it, but I actually have to look at the entire play to see how it developed. I'm kind of that nerd. But the other one is Yunus Musa, and listen, it is what it is. Back when Greg Berhalter was the head coach of this team, that MMA midfield of Musa, McKennie, and Adams was the engine of that 11. And when you had those 3 playing in the midfield, good things seemed to happen. And this was supposed to be, I guess you can say, the midfield 3 moving forward. But since that, he's had he didn't necessarily have a good club move to AC Milan. That was supposed to be that kind of launching off the upward trajectory, moving to a team like Milan. Unfortunately, it didn't go well, to the point where he gets moved to Atalanta, and now he's barely even playing. And because of it, his national team opportunities have seen him dwindled. He's been called in under Poch, and Poch tried to use him on the wing. But that being said, his best position, again, is that, more of a deep-lying central midfielder. And unfortunately, we just don't play with them. And so you're trying to figure out exactly where you might be able to use them. But again, with Tim Weah on this team, right, you struggle to find out where, why you would actually have him on the roster, considering that's the reason why Tim Weah is on this roster, right? Because he plays those secondary positions a little bit better than what Yunus Musa can do. And of course, Weston McKennie, if he makes that team, he's going to have to play a little forward up the pitch. And I just don't think that, Yunus Musa can facilitate it. James Sands, And again, James Sands got his opportunity this window, and it didn't necessarily go well for James. He was okay, but that being said, it's the exact same thing as Aiden Morris, right? When you have two other central defensive midfielders play night and day better than he did, it kind of leaves you in that situation where you're on the outside looking in. It sucks. It just is what it is. Zach Steffen, and again, pick your third goalkeeper. It could be any one of these three that I just mentioned right here. It doesn't necessarily matter because they're not going to see the pitch. Now, if you want experience for your third goalkeeper, take Zach Steffen. Or if you want a youngster, then take Chris Brady or Diego Cochin. It doesn't necessarily matter. All three of these guys are probably going to be on the outside looking in, including Ethan Horvath, who, yes, he got the move to Sheffield Wednesday, has played better over the last month and a half, but for the most part, I think his time with the national team is done. Hasn't been called in quite a long time. I think his last call in was late 2024, so it's been a while. So really, all three of these are on the outside looking in. But that being said, if you want experience for your third, then take Zach Steffen. Or if you want youth, whatever, pick your goalkeeper, because it doesn't necessarily matter at that stage. And last category, in Pacha's doghouse. And there's the smiling face of Joe Scally. And it sucks, right? Because Joe Scally, unfortunately, by the way, if you guys were watching Borussia Mönchengladbach's, if you're watching that today, first and foremost, congratulations, because you have patience. But that being said, it's like that team is probably going to get relegated. And I would probably assume that stage Joe Scally gets sold. But Joe Scally is at least one of the bright spots for that team. But, and on the U.S. men's national team, he's able to facilitate multiple different roles. And a lot of people have been essentially been screaming for his inclusion. But that being said, he gets left out, which kind of leads I guess you could say, some credibility to that report about the March window and the golf cart and all that other stuff. And the fact that, he probably, the Joe Scally's first impression with Mauricio Pochettino probably wasn't a good one. And that's the reason why he's been continuously left off rosters since that point. And what's unfortunate is he's actually played pretty well. And he's actually shown some very good upward mobility when it comes to the attack as well, too. Because he has started to get forward a little bit for Borussia Mönchengladbach and kind of get involved in the attack. And I think his overall play has actually improved, even though Borussia Mönchengladbach is dog shit. But that being said, it's like he still continues to get left out, which makes you think that, he's probably in Pacha's doghouse, and he's probably just one of those guys that Pacha just doesn't like. Sad but true. And lastly is Gio Reyna. And I don't necessarily know if he's really in Pacha's doghouse. But that being said, I have him here because I don't know if Gio Reyna has a spot in this national team for this window. The talent is there, but whether it's injury or whether it's form, for whatever reason, Gio just, for whatever reason, can't see the field. And what's interesting about this one is Gladbach probably could use him. And if he's fit and he's in form, he's probably going to get a lot of minutes. And if that's the case, and he's producing, the question is at that point, does Poch call him into the national team? There's only two more windows that he's going to be able to get an opportunity. It's like in November or in March. So you tell me, which window is it going to be? And then if he does get called in, he's going to have a hell of a window to even be in a consideration. I don't think there's really all that much time left for Gio, which means he's a 2030 guy. And for me, that's it. But outside of that, I do think that there are a handful of guys. Yeah, it's hard to keep my eyes on Mönchengladbach. Yeah, dude, you and me both. Dude, that was bad. That was like, they're going to get relegated this year without a doubt. And which at that point, both Gio and Joe Scally are going to get the move. And I didn't necessarily expect that because, Mönchengladbach always is that mid-table, Bundesliga team that, is neither good nor bad. They're just kind of consistent right where they are. For me, they're like the Fulham of the Bundesliga. You know what I mean? It just is what it is. Like, exactly where, when the year starts, exactly where they're going to finish. But this year, it's all fallen apart. And if that's the case, both of those guys are going to be on a different team next year, which means that process starts all over again for Gio, which means, it's going to take some time for him to get stable, let alone get national team call-ups. But that is my World Cup roster prediction show. Pretty clear cut. I thought there were a few performances that vaulted certain players up the depth chart, specifically Tanner Tessman, 100%, and Haji Wright. Without a doubt, those two guys if I had to circle two players, those are the guys that took most advantage of their October call-ups. I also thought Christian Roldan and Miles Robinson also had good windows as well too. So a couple MLSers in that quartet right there. But that being said, when I look at this, for me, this is just out a trend of how Mauricio Pochettino continues to pick his teams. A lot of these guys are going to get recalled because of the of the play and of the leadership of that, of what they displayed out on the pitch, right? And of course, Mauricio Pochettino rewards those guys. And so there's a good possibility that we're going to see a lot of these guys in November as well too. Rightly so when you think about Tanner Tessman, because what I really want to see is Tanner play next to Tyler Adams. I want to see how that looks against Uruguay. 100%, I want to see that. I want to see a back three of Richards on the right, Ream centrally, McKenzie on the left, Anthony Robinson on the left, Serginho Dest on the right, double sixes of Tessman and Adams, two underneath Pulisic and Tillman, and Ballo up top against Uruguay. I want to see that lineup against a team like Uruguay, who is absolutely phenomenal. And of course, I wouldn't mind seeing that against Paraguay as well too. I really don't want to see any more rotation. Against Australia, you're able to get away with it, but in this upcoming window, you're not. And if that pisses off certain clubs because you're playing Christian Pulisic 2 straight matches at 60, 70 minutes, whatever, it's the national team. It's unfortunate, but it's true. If you didn't want your best players representing another country, then don't accept their call-ups. What are you going to do? Right? We're preparing for a World Cup. Gio should have went off to Italy. Yeah, he should have. He should have went to Parma. I completely agree with that. But that being said, we do this at the end of every single window. And of course, we'll be back with this show at the end of the November window as well, too. Same thing with stock up, stock down. And of course, on Monday, we are back with our Yanks Abroad series as we recap the weekend that was for the U.S. men's national team pool players that are playing in Europe. So that's going to be dope. And I'm sure we're going to have a show on Tuesday as well, too, talking, about U.S. soccer in some capacity. I just have yet to decide on what I want to talk about. But of course, tomorrow, obviously, it's all about the Premier League as we have the Hotspur watch along as Tottenham Hotspur take on Aston Villa. So that's going to be tomorrow, I believe, morning at 9:00 Eastern. So there's plenty of cool content coming along. And I would probably assume on Sunday as well, too, there probably will be an MLS live stream as well, too. So definitely look out for that. Make sure you hit the like and subscribe button and make sure you hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on any of Stateside Footies content. I hope you guys have enjoyed your Saturday. I know for a fact I have. It's going to be an even better Sunday. So until we see each other again, man, enjoy your night.